In Part 2, we'll discuss the analysis and comparison of Spanish and English linguistic features, and we'll also pose some anticipated difficulties. Language is made up of several different levels. It is divided into three main categories: pronunciation, grammar, and semantics, each of which is subdivided further. Pronunciation consists of phonetics and phonology. Grammar is comprised of morphology and syntax, and semantics is made up of lexicon and discourse, which includes pragmatics. Although we can concentrate on any of these levels largely to the exclusion of others, these different facets of the structure of language are in fact harmoniously interrelated. The fact that the different levels of language come into play concurrently might be represented by the model of language structure seen here, proposed by David Crystal in 1987. This model shows that entering the system at any one level provides access to all the other levels. All levels are interconnected and dependent on each other to communicate properly. It is important to understand the working definitions of the following vocabulary words. 1. Linguistic is the scientific study of language. 2. Phonetics. It deals with the articulation of sounds, their transmission from speaker to hearer, and audition and perception of these sounds by the hearer. 3. Phonology. It is a branch of linguistics that studies the linguistic use of the sounds and the way that different languages organize sounds to convey differences of meaning. 4. Phonemes. It is the smallest unit of sounds in language. One of the main concerns of phonology is identifying phonemes in particular languages. 5. Morphology. Words are composed of morphemes, which are the smallest units of grammar. A word might consist of one morpheme, like the word
change,
or two or more, like
changed,
and
unchangeable.
6. Syllables. Syllables are units of language smaller than a word but larger than a phoneme. 7. Syntax. Syntax is study the way word combines to form larger units like phrases, clauses, and sentences. 8. Semantics can be defined as those aspects of meaning that are unchanging across different occasions of utterances, and pragmatics is the more varying protean part of meaning. The vowel system in Spanish consists of 5 vowels: a, e, I, o, u. English language uses the same 5 vowels pronounced
A, E, I, O, U,
and the letter Y that acts as both a vowel and a consonant. The same vowel can have 2 different sounds in English: long sounds and short sounds, which is not seen in Spanish. For example, an I can be both short
I,
and long.
I,
This is seen in words like
mit,
or.
might.
Consonants that are not seen in the English alphabet can pose problems for English speakers when speaking Spanish, including ñ, r, and ella. For example, the word señor
Sir or Mr.
and the word niño.
Boy.
To pronounce the double R, sound properly, one needs to roll his or her R's. For example, the word carro
Car.
or the word tres.
3.
Ella, it is pronounced like a J. For example, llave
Key.
or lluvia.
Rain.
In both English and Spanish, consonants are pronounced in different ways based on their articulation. The tongue, mouth, and teeth are used to make diverse sounds as seen in the figure above. In Spanish, syllables are categorized in three types. The most common syllable structure is direct or open. Direct open syllables have either a consonant preceding a vowel, like the word zapato, which means shoes, or a syllable that is composed of only a vowel, azul, which means blue. Indirect or closed syllables have a vowel preceding the consonant, arte, which means art, alto, which means tall, and campo, which means field. Compound syllables have elements of both direct and indirect structure, like the word frasco, which means bottle. In the English language, there are 6 different kinds of syllables. 1. Closed syllables have one and only one vowel, and it ends in a consonant. For example, the word in, ask, track, sock, stretch, and on. 2. Open syllables. Open syllables have one and only one vowel, and that vowel occurs at the end of the syllable. For example, the word no, she, I, a, and spry. 3. Silent E syllables. They end in a E, has one and only one consonant before that E, and has only one and only one vowel before that consonant. For example, the word eight, ice, tune, slope, strobe, and these. 4. Vowel combination syllables. They has a cluster of 2 or 3 vowels or a vowel consonant unit with a sound or sounds particular to that unit. For example, rain, day, sea, bell, pie, peace, noise, toy, cue, and true. 5. Vowel R syllables. Includes one and only one vowel followed by an R, or one vowel followed by an R which is followed by a silent E, or a vowel combination followed by an R. For example, car, or, care, ire, air, and deer. 6. Consonant L, E syllables. A consonant is followed by LE. The vowel sound in these syllables is the schwa sound that occurs before the L. For example, bl and kl. One of the biggest differences between Spanish and English language is that Spanish language has gender and number derivation, while English does not. Every noun in Spanish has a specific article that shows not only the gender of the word, but also if the word is singular or plural. For example, el niño, the boy, los niños, the boys, la niña, the girl, las niñas, the girl, el restaurante, the restaurant, los restaurantes, the restaurants, la casa, the house, las casas, the houses. Syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language. In a sentence, the change of word order will generally imply some kind of change in meaning, which might be drastic depending on the sentence. For example, if I say, me and Karen will do it, instead of Karen and I will do it, the difference in meaning is minimal. However, Karen will be more likely to agree to cooperate if I use the first expression than if I use the second one, because the first one sounds friendlier and therefore more encouraging. In Spanish, sentences include a subject and a verb. For example, Pablo lee.
Pablo reads.
While we can't omit a subject pronoun in English, In Spanish, we can. This occurs when context makes clear who or what the subject is, or if the conjugation used only has one possible subject. For example, Pablo lee, toca el piano también.
Pablo reads. He plays the piano too.
O jugamos fútbol.
We play soccer.
As you can see in the examples, in Spanish you do not need a pronoun, while in English you do. Spanish adjectives come after the noun they're describing. In English, the adjective modifying the nouns precede the noun. For example, Néstor lee libros buenos.
Nestor reads good books.
In the Spanish example, the adjective bueno comes after the noun libros. In the English example, books, the noun, come after the adjective good. To make a sentence negative in English, we typically include do not or does not, or the contractions don't or doesn't. For example,
I play soccer changes to I do not play soccer.
to make a sentence negative in Spanish, simply include the word no in front of the verb. For example, yo juego fútbol changes to yo no juego fútbol. One big difference between English and Spanish is the formation of questions. In English, we add a helping verb to change a statement into a question. For example, the statement,
Pablo reads books changes to the question, does Pablo read books?
in Spanish, we generally just switch the normal subject-verb order. For example, in the statement, Pablo lee libros changes to the question, lee Pablo libros? Or lee libros Pablo? When the subject pronoun is omitted, the question mark let us know the sentence is a question. For example, ¿lee libros?
Does he read books?
In both languages, semantics studies the meaning of words, and pragmatics studies conversational word interaction. For example, the sentence, she has too many hats, has a meaning which can be worked out by adding together the meanings of the individual words. On the other hand, the expression, she is wearing too many hats, cannot be analyzed on the basis of its components. It is an idiomatic expression that has no meaning in Spanish. In Spanish, it will be something like, ella suele tener muchos cargos.
The semantics and pragmatics of English, as well as morphology and phonology, cause many difficulties for Spanish speakers when learning English. Two of the most commonly observed problems are language differences and articulation. First, omitting the subject. In English, the subject needs to be stated, but in Spanish, the subject is dropped to avoid being repetitive. An example of this is beautiful here. An English speaker would say, it is beautiful here. Next, the use of have while telling age. In English, speakers think of age as being the years, where in Spanish, the speaker thinks of age as having years. An example would be, I have 21 years. In English, it would be, I am 21 years old. Next, gender confusion. Spanish speakers get confused when it comes to words like him, her, he, she, because the Spanish pronoun is su and represents both masculine and feminine. An example would be, in Spanish, we would say, it is she bag, instead of it is her bag. Another difficulty would be using double negatives. Using a double negative is two negative elements. English speakers do not use double negatives. In Spanish, a double negative is common and used as a reinforcement. An example would be, I don't want nothing, or it should be in English, I don't want anything. I don't have nothing. I can't get no satisfaction. Further examples are apostrophe S is often omitted in plurals, possessives, and regular third person present tense. In English, if you put apostrophe S at the end of a noun, it is considered possessive. But in Spanish, when speaking possessive, de is used to connect to the owner. Because there is no apostrophe in Spanish, adding S makes it plural. An example might be, the girl apple is red, instead of the girl's apple is red. Ed is often omitted. In a regular past tense word, the ed may be omitted. Example of a Spanish speaker would say, everyone talk when the teacher was teaching. English, we would say, everyone talked when the teacher was teaching. Adjectives come after the noun. In English, adjectives usually come before the noun, where in Spanish, adjectives can come before, but mostly after the noun. An example would be, the girl pretty is young, instead of the pretty girl is young. Another common mistake would be the misuse of prepositions. English prepositions such as in, on, at are often mixed up by Spanish speakers. In Spanish, these translate to en. An example for a Spanish speaker might be, the computer is at the table, instead of the computer is on the table. Putting es in front of words, in front of an S. Most Spanish words that have an S and a consonant all start with E as the first letter. When an English word begins with S, Spanish speakers want to add the S. For this reason, the language is called Español. An example of putting E in front of an S might be, the stop sign instead of the stop sign. My final common mistake for a Spanish speaker learning English would be, I am agree instead of I agree. In English, agree is a verb. In Spanish, agree is an adjective. We say in English, I agree with you. Some of my Spanish friends say, I am agree. The differences between Spanish and English articulation sometimes causes challenges to Spanish speakers when learning English. Articulation is formulating clear and distinct sounds in speech with vowels and consonants. Some of these articulation differences are as follows. First, there is no J sound in Spanish. Speakers may substitute the Y for the J. For instance,
Yellow
would be pronounced yellow in English, or
use
juicy in English. Spanish does not voice the sound of J. It represents a fricative that is produced in the back of the mouth. Next, a common articulation difference would be the B and the V substitution. In English, the V is a voiced fricative using teeth and lip. Spanish speakers tend to replace it with a plosive B or a closed sound using both lips. An example of a Spanish substitution would be
viper.
In English, we would say viper. Another difficulty could possibly be the final consonants are devoiced. In English, S and Z are two different phonemes, whereas in Spanish, both letters appear in different words, but the pronunciation is S. In Spanish, a speaker would pronounce
nos,
and in English, it would be nose. Next, the T is voiceless. The TH, th, does not exist as a distinct phoneme in Spanish. The sound of the voiceless TH, th, does not exist in Spanish. An example of a Spanish speaker would be,
teeth,
in English we would say teeth. Next, when words start with H, the H is silent. English H is a glottal fricative, which is a sound that you would use, and if you used it, it would steam up a mirror. Spanish speakers use a velar fricative instead. Example of a Spanish would be
hola,
and English we would say hola. CH, SH substitution. In English, these two different phonemes are different, whereas in Spanish, may use them often without changing the word meaning. Examples of these would be, in Spanish,
sheep,
English we would call them sheep.